Somewhere in my house is a photograph from the fall of 1987. In that photograph, I'm in a dress shirt and tie. I also have more hair. I also have darker hair. I also have much bigger eyeglasses on. Around my ankle is a metal chain, and that's attached to a bowling ball. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our guests today, I talk about this photograph because it has two different intersections of what we call technical professionalism at that day and age in IBM. The first one, the dress code at that time, stated that engineers wore ties and technicians did not. And Mike, I believe you were probably at that point too in your career that you knew that dress code, even though it was never written down, it was the dress code. And for me, that dress code ended in about 1993 when we realized that we had lost a lot of money in the early 90s wearing ties and dress shirts. And the second object, the ball and chain, was given to people in our area that were going to be getting married in the near future. And we were expected to walk around the plant with the ball and chain. That tradition ended also in the early 1990s because it was deemed as unprofessional. Now you can also take whatever that symbolism is of that ball and chain, and you can, that's in the eye of the beholder to understand what that meant, but it was also declared to be unprofessional. So what does it mean to be a professional in the technical field? And I'm talking about my area in engineering, not necessarily any area that has licensing or that has board certification. I'm talking about technical professionalism that is a little more vague, a little more undefined. And so I did some research on this, and professionalism is often defined as behavior that's tied to a set of ethics. But the ethics that are often discussed in engineering almost sound like the Boy Scouts model. Be true, be loyal, be honest, be all these other items. So it's a little vague as to what it really means. And in fact, I think at times professionalism has often been deemed to fit whatever the occurrence is. And I was often thinking that sometimes professionalism comes across as this Supreme Court decision from the 1960s where Justice wrote, "I know it when I see it." And often professionalism seems to be in that kind of mode where we define it to fit whatever the category is. So again, it seems like it's a little bit of Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts model, but there are places where we really do have agreement as to what professionalism is in engineering and in other technical fields. We know that accuracy in reporting is key. In fact, it's not just for engineers, for all people that are employed. Accuracy in reporting is paramount. Reporting hours, if a person is on a contract to a customer, reporting those hours that are actually worked. On a travel or trip, accurately reporting expenses and not trying to game the system to get more money coming out of expenses. And reporting results from experiments and tests, to be accurately stating what were those results and what were those outcomes, and if there's actions that have to be taken as a result of that. But going beyond what is detailed here as reporting, there's a lot of disparity, and it's been used in a lot of ways. As I say, professionalism was used to define a dress code, and probably in some fields still does. We never wore the white lab jackets or the ESD coats, but some places I've seen at IBM do that in their manufacturing areas. We never had to do that, but I've seen that in other areas. So what are issues today, 2022, as I mentioned in my title, that are coming up as professional terms today? I found at least 4 items, and I plan to do this list in a follow-on speech to talk about what these mean in today's environment. I know there was a lot of discussion before COVID about what remote work meant. Because at one point we had swung from saying that we want everybody in their office, and then swung over to say that, hey, it's okay to work remote for a while, or if you are away for a while, to be remote. But now we're trying to swing back to the center before COVID hit, thinking that maybe people aren't working as hard when they're remote. Maybe they're slacking off. Maybe they're not being as engaged. And we've heard this mentioned is that, well, there's a lot of discussion that happens in the hallway where it's really useful to get people together again to talk about ideas and gossip, maybe. But So we're kind of swinging back and forth between on everybody on site. Of course, COVID led everybody to be off site. And now we're trying to, what is that medium? What is that middle right now? And I think that's an issue that's coming up with professionalism. Can professionals be trusted to work in a remote environment and to get the outcomes that they need? Maybe a topic for that future speech. I think another place where none of the material really talked about what is considered professionalism, and I think Carpegum had mentioned that in her introduction, is when do you leave or when do you retire? Do you wait till a project is done? Is there a point that you can say that I've done all I can do right now and I've accomplished what I want to do and it's time to move on? The documents really never talked about how do you make that decision to look for the next job or or go to retirement. It was relatively vague about that. So I think that's another topic to discuss. And when that happens, when there's a point where you say that it's time for me to look for that next job or that point for me to look for retirement, what's required to be left behind? Now, contract obviously would state what's needed, what documentation, what notes are left behind, what has to be handed off in terms to the next person. But in other fields, it's a lot vaguer as to what is needed to say that I can leave, or I've trained my I've trained my replacements, or I've trained the people who are picking up this work. And that's still pretty vague as to what's needed to be handed off. But on the flip side of this too, I think there's a discussion point that has never been really discussed too much, in that how does a company behave professionally? We've talked about that. My youngest son has talked about where he's had people that have filed their notice and they had asked for 2 weeks, and once they had done that, they were literally escorted out the door that afternoon because they don't want the people to take trade secrets with them. So what does it mean for a company itself, the management, to act professionally? I think that's also an interesting question for another time here. So my intent was not to bumfuzzle anybody with this list of ideas. It's been something I've been thinking about, and something I've been thinking about after my son had mentioned these topics with his company. I plan to follow that up in a future speech, maybe not in 2 weeks, but another future speech. Until then, if you're at Colonial Lanes, or if you're at another bowling alley, and you see a bowling ball that has a couple extra holes in it, I think I know where it came from. Madam Toastmaster.